And I'd like to remind everybody to turn your phones down. Just in case one goes off during the meeting, it'll be a little less distracting. Also, remind everybody to sign in if you haven't already done so. Now you can go back to visiting. That was just a little housekeeping I need to get done.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Right, clock says it's 5 o'clock, and so we will start the meeting this evening with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible. Next item on the agenda this evening is the approval of the minutes from the March 21st, 2023 meeting.
Make a motion to accept the minutes.
All right,
I'll second.
all right. Motion's made, seconded. Go ahead and take a vote.
And note that I will make the amendment for the seconded. Your name in place, I will sponge, which was Luke DeGrand, since you guys actually seconded it in the last meeting. I'll make that note. Okay. DeGrand.
Aye.
McLean.
Aye.
Calvin.
Aye.
Parks.
Aye.
Mauer. Dees.
All right, the next item on the agenda is the continuation of the consideration and a vote to recommend the approval of a zoning map amendment for 302 North Oak. Brady Brothers LLC is the applicant, and this is a continuation from last time. The public hearing's been closed. So we're into discussion and vote mode. So.
Okay. So the current zoning districts of the property is neighborhood conservation residential R1, which allows for primarily single-family detached homes. There are some non-residential uses allowed via conditional use permit. An event space would be categorized as services under table 3.110A, general use, which would be permitted for the use with the CUP if approved at a later date, following the same public hearing steps that this has taken place. So the desired zoning district for the applicant is still thoroughfare access, which provides for high quality, moderate density development with a full range of residential and non-residential uses. The design requirements provide a thoroughfare access character while encouraging pedestrian and automobile access. In the established areas where there is infill development, the zoning shall not displace residential uses. Commercial development would be limited due to contributing factors such as lot setbacks, open space and landscaping requirements, parking requirements, and lot coverage maximums. Over the years from potential developers, options that have consistently came to the city have been residential of some sort, whether it's senior housing, multifamily housing, daycare / preschool uses, and event spaces. Those have been consistent questions. Can this use go in there? Typically, the daycare / preschools fall off because of the amount of money it's gonna take to bring up the building to code. So what consistently comes to play is residential and event space, which is one of the options that we have now. Section 212 thoroughfare access districts. The district provides for high quality, moderate density development with a full range of residential and non-residential uses. The desired requirements provide a thoroughfare access character while encouraging pedestrian and automobile access. The district's intensity accommodates most community, commercial, and business activities. Non-residential uses shall be limited to parcels having access to arterial or collector streets, which with interior areas, they're intended to be residential. The district is not intended to promote strip development along all arterial or collectors. In newly developing areas, the minimum parcel depth along an arterial or collector shall be 600 feet. The minimum area shall be 20 acres. In the older built-up areas where there is infill development, zoning shall not displace residential uses in areas where at least one block of residential exists. New zoning shall have depths in areas equal to or greater than similar uses of 400 feet on either side. This district shall be used in an area designated thoroughfare access in the comprehensive plan. Access standards and site plan review shall be used to ensure the adequate access and visibility are retained on regionally important land near interchanges to prevent premature development from foreclosing future development options. The planning commission must ensure that the following standards from the Paolo Land Development Ordinance shall be met to consider the zoning changes. Section 21.211 standards for zoning map amendment. In evaluating a request for a zoning map amendment, the following standards shall be considered. The proposed change is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan and the purposes of this ordinance. In areas of new development, consistency with the comp plan shall be considered to meet the standards in B, C, and D below, unless the proposed amendment would threaten public health, safety, and welfare, if so designated as planned in the comprehensive plan. The proposed change is consistent with the character of the neighborhood, the extent to which the property is consistent with the zoning and use of nearby properties, the suitability of the property for uses to which it has been proposed or restricted, the extent to which the proposed use would substantially harm the value of nearby property, the length of time the property has remained vacant as zoned, where the zoning is different from nearby properties, developed properties, the gain, if any, to the public health, safety, and welfare due to denial of the proposed amendment as compared to the hardship imposed to the landowner, if any, as a result of denial of the proposed amendment. Recommendations, so the planning commission could not recommend approval, or they could recommend approval of the zoning map amendment for 302 North Oak to the city council. So whatever is decided here tonight moves forward to the city council next month, whether it is a recommendation for approval or a recommendation for denial.
Thank you. I'm gonna make a couple comments here before we get too far into this. One of the things we need to focus on, I think, is the fact that we started out as multifamily, now we're an event center. But what we do with this piece of property tonight affects it from here on out. It's not just what somebody wants to do now or what they wanted to do last week. Anything that we do, any decision we make tonight affects that property from here on. So if the event center falls through, multifamily housing falls through, down the road, anything under TA could come in and be done with that property. So I just wanted to let everybody know that before we start deciding tonight what we do, is that we need to think long-term and not just right now what's in front of us. Kind of like, I think when they zoned this property back in the day, it was an active school. And nobody thought what happens down the road when that school is no longer there. So I just want to make those comments before we get started. So I've said my piece. Now we start discussing.
Has the event center, have they submitted any site plan, rough sketching you know, I'm certain parking will have to be addressed and everything else.
That would all have to be addressed during site plan review,
Okay.
same as landscaping, lighting.
Item F under 21-211, the length of time property has remained vacant as zoned. How long has this been?
So from my knowledge, it was purchased by Brady Brothers in 2016 and, according to recent water bill statements, the water, there's currently no water because there is an extreme leak and it needs to be upgraded and that's not happening. So there has been since they've owned it, there's been from 2017 and 2019 a break in service, and then most recently, another year of break in service.
And that break in service determines vacant or not?
They've owned it the whole time. It would just show interest in the property, in my opinion.
I think when I read vacant, I think it's not been in use. So how long has it not, how long has the building not been in use for anything? Do we know?
So for the length of time that they've owned it, they've utilized it for storage.
Okay. Good, thank you.
Aside from the storage, has it more or less been out of service, not being technically used since Cottonwood? When Cottonwood opened, that's when North School.
Head Start program is in there, and I
Oh, okay.
assume when in roughly 2016, when Brady Brothers purchased it, is when it ceased
Okay.
to be utilized day-to-day functions.
That's recent to be active. 7 years. Do we know how many students, how much activity was there up until 2016 when it was being used by Head Start? I mean, because a lot of the questions is traffic and movement and
Sure.
activity. What was the activity up to really 2016?
Sure.
For Head Start. Obviously, it's typically not the same size as an elementary school, but
Mhm.
how much activity was there?
I don't know about when Head Start was there, but when it was an active elementary school, the North School, it was. I mean, it was a regular school with the regular activity, people coming and going in the morning.
Buses, drop off, pick
Yeah.
up, things like that.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is a point of order question or what, but. I mean, depending on how we vote tonight, that doesn't automatically let anybody just come in and do whatever they want there.
Correct.
It still has to come to us, it still has to go to council. So, I mean, just,
Yes,
It goes to council.
but are you thinking about any type of business going in there or just actual
well,
process?
any type of development. I mean, say, if it was to pass tonight, and then say, for instance, the Haven doesn't follow through.
Right.
And it is rezoned like you stated. I mean, it's under all the items that were under the yes column, under thoroughfare. Those companies can't just come in and just automatically build. They still have to come through us. We still have to approve that stuff, correct?
If they're like changing the footprint and need a new site plan, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
So I mean, just if it was to go to thoroughfare, it doesn't just open the door to anything.
No.
It falls under thoroughfare. It
It-
still has to come through the whole process.
And there's a lot of, like she said, regulations on setbacks on what could go
Right.
there. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
There's a lot more places, blocks in the way for people for it to open it up.
Right.
Absolutely, yes.
So I would also like to point out, section 21-214, staff review following rezoning. It states, it is the intent of these regulations that an approved rezoning will generally result in a change of use of the subject property. As a means of ongoing monitoring of the results of the approved rezoning, staff will review the use of the property on the second anniversary of an approved rezoning and report the status, the use or development to the planning commission. So at that point, there is sort of a built-in check and balance outside of a site plan review.
Right. Okay.
They say they intended to have like 85 to 100 vehicles at any weekend.
So what would dictate the amount of vehicles being allowed to park there in a parking lot would be a parking lot. Yes, they have also stated off-street parking, anywhere in town is without being marked, no parking. Street parking is always an option, as long as it's not marked, no parking. Yes. No question over there.
Well, it appears to me on this comprehensive plan where it's pretty well states access to artillery and collector streets. That seems to me, in my opinion, is pretty solid. Because the streets go into T intersections.
Are you reading the comp plan or are you reading the definition of TA? Just so I can be on the same page. with you.
Definition of TA on that.
Okay.
That part kind of bothers me there.
Sure.
The fact that the property was purchased from the school district and the person that bought the property knew at that time what it was zoned for.
So the person that did purchase it had attempted at one time to utilize a CUP for an event space. And had stated last meeting, they pulled out for financial reasons. But reading non-residential uses shall be limited to parcels having access to arterial or collector streets. Interior areas are intended to be residential. So if we take out the event space aspect and we look at this from a purely rezoning aspect, that building, if someone came in and wanted to turn it into multifamily, in reading this, a non-residential use shall be limited to parcels having access to arterial or collector streets. End of sentence. So that leaves it open for a residential use. Doesn't state that a residential use could be has to have the access to arterial or collector. So if you were going to utilize it as something outside of a single family residence, then zoning would have to change. So to open up options, do I think that a business owner, that's a smart business owner, is going to come in and put a Chick-fil-A there? I would think not. I would think that history lends itself to the three main items that we've always been contacted by someone by, and that is residential, that is a school / a daycare, preschool daycare, or the event space. I think for what the building is set up like, that also limits what types of commercial projects would go there. So if that helps clarify anything.
Jessica, the letter that we received from Blake, is that just to us?
That was sent to me and asked to pass along to you guys.
No, because
I mean,
it
it's-
addresses a lot of this, but
Sure.
can I ask them a question?
If there's something stated in the letter that you would like to clarify, you're more, it's public information, so you're more than welcome. to
Oh,
read it.
it's not from the letter. It just, reading the letter again made me think, have a question. Is funding secure to move forward with this project?
That I don't know, and that,
Are we allowed to ask that?
I wouldn't say that is
I think that, when you look at this rezoning, it's important to, although we have a viable candidate that wants to buy the property, kind of what Mr. Kalman said. I think it would be beneficial for you to take that out and just focus on what the future of the property could hold.
Okay, sure, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I went down through the list of the uses in the TA district. A lot of them can already be done with that. A lot of them can't. And some of them would make sense for that property. A lot of them wouldn't, like Jessica said, there's a lot of them, Chick-fil-A, you're not gonna put a Chick-fil-A there, you're not gonna put a shopping center there. As you go down through here on the list. By changing the zoning, it makes the property a little more flexible from the uses that make sense for that piece of ground in that area. So that's, I just want to throw that comment out if that makes any difference to anybody.
The event space could still move forward though with the conditional use permit. That's correct.
That's assuming that you're promising somebody something now that hasn't happened yet.
They have a legal path
Yeah.
to apply for.
Well, it would appear to me, my opinion, that changing the zoning to TA, as Steve put out, is a long-term deal.
Potentially, but there is the 2-year check and balance. There's always, if we get 2 years in and the property is vacant and nothing's come about it, there's always planning commission's option to rezone it back to an NCR district.
Well, what I was kind of getting at, that if it stayed what it was, and we put a cup on it, we have basically a little more control knowing what's going on and what's coming in.
Sure.
If we go the other route and it falls through, then here we go again. We don't know what's coming. That's kind of the way I'm thinking, that personally, I think it could be better handled in a cup. And we've done that numerous times, city and even the county does it. And that is a point that the purchaser, everybody sits down and agrees to, yeah, I can live with this, I can live with that. And that usually works out really good. And that
if it-
everybody kind of knows what's going on.
Your conditional use permits are gonna be greatly limited. An event space, yes. Multifamily, no. That wouldn't be an option in the zoning district. The current zoning district in
Just
CR1.
plain residential.
It would be a single family home.
Right. And if the old school was demolished,
You could build as
you
many.
could build residential houses
Sure.
through there
Mhm, yeah,
with no problem.
correct.
In either zoning.
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't think anybody wants to see the school demolished any more than it already has
I would agree.
of neglect. I think everybody would like to see it flourish and be fixed up.
Yes.
So it's a tough decision.
We don't envy your position.
Well, I'm gonna go ahead and make a motion to recommend the approval of the zoning map amendment for 302 North Oak Neighborhood Conservation R1 to thoroughfare access. Brady Brothers LLC applicant. And I'm making my decision based on the long-term effects of this property. Right now, there's an old school sitting there. The best use of that property is actually, quite honestly, in my opinion, residential. Now, when I consider residential, I also think in terms of attached family. Okay, duplexes. There's nothing wrong with duplexes. I mean, you're gonna have some kind of residential on there, possibly. So I'm looking at kind of the longer term picture here. Whether the event center comes through or not, that's a whole different aspect to this. I'm trying to think in a little longer term, so I'm gonna make that recommendation for rezoning.
I'll second.
Got a motion in a second.
Grant,
Aye.
McLean,
So,
Calvin,
Aye.
Parks,
Aye.
Mauer,
Aye.
Dees.
Okay.
Okay, motion carries.
Okay, thank you. Now it goes to the city council.
Correct.
So you all have another shot at it.
So we didn't even get to talk?
You did last week, sorry, last month.
Oh, bullshit on this.
Yeah. Hey, clean it up or get out,
I'll get out, Steve.
okay?
I'll get out.
Okay. Yes,
I have a question. How come the chair makes the motion? I thought that was for the other people to make.
on the planning commission, the chair has the same power and authority as any of the commissioners.
I'd like to see that in writing. That's not according to any Robert's rules I know.
We can get that for you, Pete.
It doesn't make that sense anyway. The chair should be chairing the meeting. The others can make the motion in second.
We can get the documentation for you to show that I have the same authority. What?
So at the very least, it doesn't look proper.
I'm sorry that it doesn't look proper. It is what it is.
That most
Thank you for your time.
elected and appointed officials have with the people who elect and appoint you all.
Well,
Following your own rules.
we're done with this agenda item, Pete, so we're gonna move on. You're welcome to stay for the other, but all right. All right, the next item on the agenda is a public hearing for consideration and vote to recommend approval of a conditional use permit for light industry, 118 South Silver, Legacy Properties and Development LLC is the applicant. And I will take a motion to open the public hearing.
I would make a motion that we open.
Second.
I've got a motion in a second.
Okay.
Jessica, you want to call roll?
Yes. DeGrand,
Aye.
McLean,
Aye.
Calvin,
Aye.
Parks,
Aye.
Mauer. Aye. Dees. Okay.
All right.
All right, so this is for a conditional use permit for the property at 118 South Silver. The current zoning district for this property is downtown. The applicant is Legacy Properties and Development, which is the property owner. They have requested a conditional use permit for light industry. The property owner is seeking a CUP for their tenant, Heron Outdoors, who's outgrown its existing space. Heron Outdoors currently produces, packages, and distributes a line of deer feed supplements in custom printed packaging. These are then shipped to distributors and fulfillment centers with no retail sales planned for this location. Heron Outdoors states that they're the only company in the USA creating this type of product combination, and it's anticipated that the new location will lead to higher capacity and an increase in employment. Table 3.110A of the general use table states that light industry is an allowed use in the downtown zoning district under a conditional use permit. The planning commission must ensure that the following standards shall be met. The proposed use is consistent with the comprehensive plan's purposes, goals, objectives, and policies, including standards for building and structural intensities and densities and intensities of use, all be compatible with the character of the land in the immediate vicinity. The proposed use's design shall minimize adverse effects, including visual impact of the proposed use on adjacent lands. And the proposed use shall minimize adverse impacts on the environment, traffic and congestion, infrastructure, and governmental services. Staff recommendation is to approve the conditional use permit with the following conditions. Limit business usage to ground floor only, since there is an upstairs to this building. Limit loading and truck access to be Silver Street not blocked at any time. Miami and Gold can be partially blocked from maneuvering to the alley between Wea and Miami. Any time in which a street is to be partially blocked, the business owner must ensure traffic control, whether it's just them safely helping trucks back in and out. Prohibit delivery vehicles from projecting into the street or blocking sight triangles at intersections. Limit times of delivery to the established hours of operation. Control rodents by using an integrated pest management approach that includes environmental sanitation, proper product storage, rodent proofing, trapping, and poisoning. No exterior storage allowed. And at any time, the city may institute revocation of the conditional use permit for violations of the condition of approval, expiration, or reason specified in section 21-225 of the Land Development Ordinance. The city shall provide notice to the landowner and public in the same manner as it was provided for the establishment of the conditional use permit. Attached is the application, and then the map with the red star is the building to be located. Some of you are familiar with Fayetteville, will be Larry's electric.
Anybody from the public like to speak for or against this? Hearing none, I'll take a motion to close the public hearing.
Make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
DeGrand.
Aye.
McLean.
Aye.
Calvin.
Aye.
Parks.
Yes.
Mallon. Aye. Dees.
I've got a couple of questions
Okay.
on this. And maybe Legacy can address this for me, or Terry can address it for me. They're gonna use the ground floor. Are you gonna use, is there a basement under that building?
Yes, sir. Sure. Yes, there is.
Are you gonna use the basement? No, gonna use the basement.
The first floor has a concrete floor.
Right.
Imagine that. So that's why the first floor with Terry's equipment, and it's not big, it's in his garage right now.
Okay. Yeah. Thing that I see is the truck traffic. Loading and unloading. That's why I think, yeah, because that's a pretty narrow alley coming up through there.
Our 10, we've got a couple parking spaces there in front, and then another space to the south. Where the property extends to in front of the entire store.
So you're gonna park in the street to unload.
Spaces, yes.
Yeah.
Because all he's got is a couple of pallets at a time.
And it'd be a weekly or bi-weekly at the most for pickup and delivery of either raw materials or finished goods. I don't think that we're gonna impact the area much more than the food service trucks that service the restaurants, that type of activity. And the alley, I've seen, 18 wheelers go down that alley. It's a little close, but I wouldn't want to do it.
It's not our intention.
But yeah, and the curbside, with a truck with a lift gate truck will be just fine. We eventually have a forklift to handle that also.
You're thinking of box truck.
Box truck, yes, yes.
And where are you currently manufacturing?
In my garage.
In your garage?
Yeah, 910 Hemlock.
And I will say, we've never received
Yeah.
any complaints of any traffic there, so.
Go ahead, David.
No, that was my only
My
question.
only question, just because I don't know your industry, the minimize adverse impacts on the environment, is it manufacturing, production, everything all contained?
I've got some samples to share with you. Yeah, I'm an avid deer hunter. So I respect the environment and everything around it. All the materials. I produced one element. Sell. This being a finished product. There's 4 main constituents in there. And the dyed colors are what we're manufacturing. And that's what we're patent pending on. I'm the only guy on the planet making colored colors. I've got those two products we launched last year.
Yeah, you're on that.
And, we rose to the top of Amazon in 4 months.
Great.
So that's why we're moving. I mean, I'm generating pellets 7 days a week. And I'd like to leave this stuff with you if anybody is interested in.
All the materials you begin with, you use, there's no leftover residue, mush.
No,
I guess disposal of leftover product is what is my question.
everything I send out of my garage now goes to the recycling truck.
Okay,
There's really no. I use water. That's the harshest chemical I use is water. The rest is ag products, cornmeal, molasses. There's a list of ingredients on the back of these. And I have an ag license. I think we shared the ag license with you all. But I do have a current ag license. Did I felt like maybe I took you in circles. Did I answer your question?
yeah, just when you manufacture any type of product like this, there could be leftover
Right.
residue.
And I'm only manufacturing the colored items.
Yeah.
The others are purchased bulk. We blend it, and then sell it as a outdoor attraction.
Yeah, it has to be, who's this inspector?
Jamie. Jamie,
Well, anyway, KDHD or whoever that is, they got to inspect the property,
Okay,
so.
good.
it is-
so I've got that now. We've passed inspection twice on site and, no issues.
Good. Congrats on your success.
Thanks.
Good job.
Certainly, there's some outdoors here. Does anybody have friends or family members that hunt?
What's a retail for? I return it to Amazon.
If you can, those are on, yeah. It's on Amazon, it's $22.95. We're working with distributors for retail brick and mortar stores at $19.95, $20, that's kind of flexible.
You'll be on Shark Tank before we know it.
Maybe not. I don't agree with those guys.
Sounds like a great enterprise.
Thank you.
The current building vacant. Is it gonna sit in there? Yep. Okay. I was just at the car shop the other day. Make a motion. The CUP.
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, put it to a vote.
Green.
Aye.
McLean.
Aye.
Calvin.
Aye.
Parks.
Aye.
Mauer. Aye. Dees.
Thank you.
Right, yeah.
You're welcome. I don't want to clutter you up. Did I take it?
I'll use
it.
All right.
Use it? Good.
Yeah. Here.
Good.
It's like-
By the way, the orange
I put it on.
and the green is green apple. And then the other colors have got berry
Yeah.
and peanut.
Okay.
So it's not just pretty, it
Right,
works.
yeah.
It's got flavor.
You can test it for us and come back and tell us the flavors are correct.
So it sits in, but I'm sure.
Trash somehow, yeah.
There you go.
All right. Let's take care of that. All right, next item on the agenda this evening is a public hearing for the consideration and a vote to recommend approval of a zoning text amendment. Tiny home clusters. City of Paola is the applicant.
Okay, so we've kind of been over this a few times, most recently at our February planning commission meeting. You all finalized suggested text amendments regarding tiny home cluster developments to update the LDO. This was spurred by current building codes, needing to create some zoning rights regulations for these communities. So attached, we have first attachment A is the table. All of our general use tables stating what zoning districts they would be permitted in, parking requirements, land use sizes, spacing between tiny homes, which, which was brought to my attention, we have a minimum acreage size of 4, and we have a maximum acreage size at 6. I did have someone reach out, with a little more explanation on, we might want to look at those numbers for the acreage sizes.
Okay.
Due to the numbers, the mass quantities would fit on those acre sizes. So if we wanted to look at maybe shrinking it down to like 1.5 acres and capping it at 5 or 6 acres, something the opposite direction than what it was. That might be something that we can look at, but we'll work through this and then we'll get to.
We need to open the public hearing. So I'll take a motion to open the public hearing.
I'd make a motion, we open the hearing.
Second.
We got a motion and a second.
Grant,
Aye.
McLean,
Aye.
Calvin,
Aye.
Parks,
Aye.
Mallard. Aye. Dees.
Okay. Anybody from the public want to speak for or against?
Alan Hire, 15895 Lakeshore Drive. What is the occupancy requirement in those homes per square foot?
Based on the 28, it might benefit us to go through this.
Okay,
I can sit down.
Yeah.
It might
Then you
benefit, it
come
might
back
answer
up
your
now.
question.
Right, because I'm concerned about enforcement.
Sure, yeah,
okay, so go ahead.
Okay.
Let's go through it and then we'll take comments. How's
okay,
that?
yeah, that might work. Okay, so we went over the general use table, the limited and conditional use standards, NCR, district residential uses, and use and lot standards. Those are all contained on these tables. So if you gentlemen want to look over that and have any questions regarding that. So right now we have the tiny home clusters set for conditional use in estate, suburban, and then thoroughfare access. They would all require conditional uses. And then table A1 would also require, in the zoning districts, would also be permitted in the NCR3 and NCR2, and then as conditional uses. So across the board, they would require conditional use permits in all of those districts. Tiny home clusters would require buffer yards. They would also require 1,000 feet between tiny home cluster developments. Minimum spacing for tiny homes would be 10 feet between each home. The minimum site area, which I noted 4 acres, and then the maximum site area, lot area was 15 acres. The table A1, tiny home cluster, so NCR1, no, they would not be, correct myself, NCR1 and NCR2, they would not be permitted uses, but in the NCR3 district, they would be a conditional use. Parking is required at 1.5 parking spaces per dwelling unit, plus 1 guest parking per every 3 tiny homes. And then all of your open space requirements are down below. So they'd have to be connected to the public sewer system, and the minimum lot area per tiny home would be 3,500 square feet. The minimum lot width would be 40 feet. They'd have to have a street yard setback of 15 feet and a rear yard setback of 8 feet. The height would be 18. Tiny homes may not, with a caveat, the tiny homes may not exceed 18 feet in height, except that pitched roofs with a minimum pitch of 6 to 12 may extend up to 25 feet in height. All parts of a roof above 18 feet in height must be pitched. Maximum building coverage, 850 square feet. So then moving on to the actual text portion of the LDO. Tiny home, single-family cluster developments may be considered for a conditional use permit if the following standards are met. The cluster development must be retained under common ownership, including the common open spaces, building, and structures. A site plan is submitted and approved by the Planning Commission and the City Council. Tiny home development shall only be permitted with a minimum spacing of 1,000 feet between tiny home developments. The minimum site area in any district is 4 acres with a maximum of 15. All tiny home cluster developments must provide an on-site storm shelter. All tiny home cluster developments must comply with lot setbacks in Article 4. Flexible setbacks are permitted from lot boundaries to enable functional site design during site plan review by the planning commission. All tiny homes shall maintain a minimum separation of 10 feet from other tiny homes within the development. Each tiny home within a development shall meet off-street parking requirements in table 3.110A. Off-street parking spaces for tiny homes must be of an acceptable all-weather surface such as asphalt, concrete, chip seal, graded and compacted gravel, or other stabilized system. All tiny homes must be connected to all available public utilities. Composting toilets are not permitted. Tiny homes on wheels are not permitted. Tiny homes may be used as a guest house as defined in section 3.314 as allowed by the general use table. And with these, tiny homes as a guest house is defined as a small detached accessory dwelling unit located on the same lot as a primary single-family detached dwelling unit that is intended to provide living quarters for non-paying personal guests of the owner of the principal residence. The primary dwelling unit must be owner occupied. The tiny home guest house shall not have separate utility meters. The area where the tiny home guest house is located shall not be divided off into a new lot of record. Tiny homes used as a guest house shall be on a site with an owner occupied single family residence. The architectural design, roofing material, exterior materials and color, roof pitch and style, type of windows and trim details of the unit shall be substantially the same as and visually compatible with the primary dwelling. Tiny homes used as a guest house may not be on wheels and shall be placed on a permanent foundation. No more than one tiny home guest house per property. The combined square footage of the principal structure, guest house, detached garage, and storage utility shed shall not exceed the maximum building coverage in table 4.110A use and lot standards, where no maximum building coverage is provided. The combined structures shall not cover more than 70% of the lot area. Landscaping requirements, section 6.120. 1 landscaping plant unit per tiny home. 4 landscaping plant units per acre of open space. The number of plant units required may be altered by the planning commission during site plan review. The requirement of an opaque fence around the perimeter of the lot will be at the discretion of the zoning administrator during the site plan review process. Each tiny home that is moved in or built on site must be inspected by the city of Fayetteville building inspector to obtain a certificate of occupancy. Utility easements as required by a service provider and drainage easements as necessary to cover any drainage improvement shall be shown on the site plan with easement dimensions and recording information provided. All structural requirements shall be met in the 2018 International Building Code Appendix Q, according to AQ 103 ceiling height, AQ 104 lofts, AQ 105 emergency escape and rescue openings. Minimum square footage shall not account for the required cooking facilities, toilet faculty areas, or lofts, which are required in addition to the minimum clear floor area of 120 square feet for a single occupant, 220 square feet for 2 occupants, and 320 square feet for 3 occupants. Defining a tiny home. Tiny home means a detached and self-contained dwelling unit permanently constructed on a foundation, frame, or chassis as designed for use as permanent living quarters that A, is equipped for the basic functional areas that support normal daily routines such as cooking, sleeping, and sanitation, must only be 1 story, excluding lofts. And tiny home does not include a trailer, semi-trailer, camp trailer, recreational vehicle, or other manufactured housing. I recommend that the proposed LDO text amendment for tiny home cluster developments be approved. So now we can let Alan
Now, Alan,
ask a question again.
Well, as I was listening, I became confused. There's really 2 sets of tiny homes in this proposal. There's the mother-in-law house, and then there's the cluster. Is that correct?
So there's already an allowed guest house permitted for the LDO. So the intent is to use a smaller tiny home as a guest house in previously permitted zoning districts.
Okay, but I guess from a simplistic standpoint, why would you mix the 2 together and not make them two different items? That's just my opinion. The more things you mix together like that, the easier it is to get confused on which one is which and which part of the book is which and so on and so forth. And I never quite understood on this 1.5 acres, which is 60,000 feet, give or take, square feet, how many tiny homes you can put on. Because it looks to me like you only need about 2,500 square feet for a tiny home and the parking. So you could put a lot of tiny homes on 1.5 acres. Now, granted, we don't know what all that means, but 60,000 feet is 1.5 acres. And if you only have to have 3,000 square feet for the tiny home and the parking, then you just put 20 of these on 1.5 acres, which is about 5 city lots
In the storm shelter
and a storm shelter.
and open space and landscaping.
Right, I'm just saying that it's gonna get really tough to do this from the standpoint of enforcement and regulation. Then the other thing I'm concerned about is how do you handle on private property a tiny home that was designed for 2 people at 220 square feet, if I got the numbers right? All of a sudden, it has 3 people in it. Who governs how many people are in that house? And who's gonna throw them out? When you get 3 people in a tiny house that's made for 2 people, for regulation. Who's gonna throw them out? Is that the landlord's responsibility? Is that the city's responsibility? Is it the sheriff's responsibility? So I didn't hear anything defined about enforcement when you get too many people living in these houses, and unfortunately, I have grandchildren that are about this tall. And they're guys, and they have a tendency to aggregate. So all of a sudden, you understand where I'm going
I
here?
know where you're going at.
All of a sudden, you could end up with 3 guys or 4 guys living in this little house. And no enforcement. So, just that, I'm sure I got more questions, but I'll quit for the moment.
Maybe number one,
Wait,
oh,
I'll let you.
Go ahead.
We'll let everybody speak.
okay, that's fine. Thank you, sir, yeah.
We'll address all the questions.
Pete Bell. I got a question I didn't quite understand. Did you say 1.5 acres was the minimum?
That's up to our planning commissioners to kind of discuss tonight.
So I'm curious, it sounds to me like this could go where North School is.
Not under the current zoning,
Hmm?
not under the current zoning.
Well, but you just changed the thoroughfare access, so it couldn't go there because it's thoroughfare access.
The zoning as it stands is NCR 1. No, it could not go in an NCR 1 district.
Can you speak a little louder, please?
I said the current zoning is NCR 1. No, it would not be allowed to go in an NCR 1 zoning district.
You're assuming what we passed tonight, changing it to TA will be what the city council does. And we can't make that assumption at this point in time, Pete.
Well, I'm not worried about whether they do it or not. I'm curious if what you're proposing could at some point end up on North School block.
With a conditional use permit,
So it could.
with a conditional use permit.
So I'm asking is, yes, it can
Yeah.
end up on North School's block, because it sounds to me like this is a modern version of a trailer park without wheels.
Think veterans housing in Kansas City.
I'm familiar with that. but Kansas
Okay,
City is-
that's what the equivalent of this is.
No, but Kansas City is a huge place.
I'm just
Lots
saying
of
that,
options for
Pete.
location.
what I'm saying is, this is the same kind of cluster. When we're talking about tiny home cluster, as the veterans housing cluster is in the city, in Kansas City. Now, Kansas City is a huge city compared to us, but that cluster is what we're looking at, what we're talking about here. Okay?
I'm not
And these would all have to meet, building codes and be inspected by a building
Yeah.
inspector. Correct me if I'm wrong, the ones up there were done on a project basis that
Yeah.
might not be met by the same standards.
I couldn't address that, but this would be similar to those, similar to the concept as those houses are up
I
there.
understand, I understand.
So if you're familiar with those, then
Yes, some things don't make sense to me. I heard a reference to a height maximum of 18 and 25 feet.
18 feet. But if a pitched roof makes it taller, then it would be taller. So a traditional single-family home can be up to 35 feet, according to our LDO.
But as far as what it looks like to me, if you're talking about. What is it, 150, 200 and something and 300 square, feet, how are you making something like that 25 feet tall, making it look right or be safe in a high wind? That, I don't understand that concept.
So the square footage is for one specific room, not including faculties, not including toilet faculty areas and lofts and required cooking facilities. So in one of these, it has to have one room with open square footage or a one-person occupant of 120 square feet. And then you kind of add in the other, so if you add in the kitchen and just, it would grow from there. But it has to at least have one open room of 120 square feet.
I
And
understand.
then it can have a loft living area that would make the pitched roof, it would increase the height of it.
Architecturally, the square footage you're talking about. As a two-story building, basically, doesn't make sense to me.
Well, the 2018 building codes is where this is taken from, so that's what we're gonna intend to follow, would be those.
The 2018 building code,
That was adopted by the city of Taylor.
I don't remember anybody knowing about tiny houses in 2018.
I can't speak to what you knew in 2018.
Well, my observation is, I'm not questioning the morality or ethics of tiny houses and the need for them in certain areas, but in the city of Paola, which is where we are, if you're gonna make it so they can go where the North School is, it doesn't make a bit of sense. And if you're gonna build structures that appear to be unsafe in the wind, I don't understand that either. Like I said, I don't have anything against them, but.
They're built on a permanent foundation. We're not talking about tiny homes on wheels. I can understand your concern
Well, I
there.
think this is, what you have already in town is the trailer park, southwest side. Look at the conditions you have. And like, who was it just got up and said, when all the relatives and all the fraternity guys move into one, it's gonna become a circus. It's not gonna become a great place for one veteran in a wheelchair.
next,
Mark Bukes, 9 Tower Street. I didn't intend to stay for this part, but I was alarmed when I heard the 1.5 acre proposal. When I think about the density that brings, and I think about whenever changes are made and you hear the phrase about letting the camel's nose under the tent, and pretty soon you've got a tent full of camel. And that's what I'm kind of thinking this sounds like if we're talking about taking that down from, what was it, 1.5 acres, 2 to 3 acres down to
4 acres.
4 acres. The density that allows in areas that maybe aren't designed to handle that density, particularly with all it takes is a thoroughfare access, which could easily happen, as we found out, concerns me, and the process in which it's being discussed concerns me as well.
thank you, Mark. Anybody else want to make any comments? All right, hearing none, I'll take a motion to close the public hearing.
I'd like a motion to close. I'll second.
Grant.
Aye.
McLean.
Aye.
Calvin.
Aye.
Parks.
Aye.
Mauer. Aye. Dees.
I understand what they're saying about the 1.5 acres.
Mhm.
How did you come up with that number, Judge?
So originally, the 4 acres, was looked at from a standpoint of just kind of mathematical equations from surrounding areas that utilize tiny home clusters. 1.5 acres was brought to my attention that if there's a property in the city limits that I could think of, a couple, the density that would go onto 4 acres would be less on 1.5 than it would be on 4. So if you take 4 acres and you divide it out by the square footage per lot, you could fit
a lot of,
a lot on
lot
there.
of tiny houses
Yes.
on 4
If you
acres.
shrink your lot size down, the density also comes down with it. And you know, there still aren't a lot of
Yeah, that-
acre and a half, 2 acres, whatever you see fit. I am
No,
really here at your
yeah.
suggestions, just kind of.
Yeah.
Some things that were brought to my attention that, hey, you might wanna look at the number, which is fine if you, however you guys see fit, then that's.
I mean, that does make sense.
Mhm.
I mean, to have a great big huge development of tiny houses.
I think the red flag came up with if someone wanted to annex in, you know, 15 acres right outside of town, and they wanted to annex in, then that opens up for 120 tiny, I don't know the number of the max, but it opens up for
For
that.
a lot of tiny homes to be put out there. Yeah, okay, so now I understand that. Where you
So
were-
that was kind of driving the number down, was the intent behind dropping the lot size, not the lot size, but the density size.
Yeah. That does make sense.
So it still requires conditional use permit though, regardless, correct?
I'm sorry, what was that?
It would still require a conditional use. permit
Yes.
Regardless. so-
Regardless of any zoning district, this would require a conditional use permit. So that, I mean, it's going to require a site plan just because of utility hookups, positioning of homes. Every development is gonna require one, so. Any residential development.
Yeah, but like people don't have to worry about it, it's just gonna pop up and nobody's gonna be.
Yes, no. And it's not, and they're not single family, so that's also important to point out is. It's not, you know, if you and I live next door and there's an empty lot in the middle, it's not that, it is a cluster development,
So I just want to reiterate, it can't pop up on an empty vacant lot in town.
correct, okay.
Right, it's gotta have some room to do it. Yeah.
They wouldn't be able to do something on North School property without.
Yes. But
Are there ordinances to say what property qualifies and what property doesn't?
for this,
Yes.
so it's broken up by zoning district, and in table 3, 110A, general use table. It says at the top, it'll be the zoning district, title name, so if you look under TA, it says C, it requires a condition. So to use North School as an example, if it already has a building on that property. So no, you could not come in and put a tiny home development there unless that building was demolished. You can't cut it up, split it, you can't do a lot split because then you're not gonna meet side requirements,
Right.
so.
Like, I don't recall, must have been sleeping then, but on the tiny homes used as guest housing,
Mhm.
I'm a little. I understand that there would have to be square footage. It couldn't go in anybody's residential house.
Right. I can tell you and where a guest house is permitted via,
But if you're-
is,
Putting it on a foundation, or you're pulling the wheels off this trailer and putting a skirter out it. You know, it looks like that would be a permanent. The way it's kind of written, it might be a permanent situation.
I guess I'm not understanding clearly what your question is.
Well,
Are you concerned about trailer type?
no, I basically, mother-in-law's houses has always been a problem. As far back as I can remember,
A problem, and could you define what you mean by it? They've always been a problem?
Well, there's a few around that were grandfathered in the city.
Okay,
That were basically a mother-in-law's house, but they're very rarely ever let being built.
so there's already in the LDO, there's already ordinances that say yes or no where a guest house can go. Which is what you're referring to, a mother-in-law's house.
Mm-hmm.
What I did was take the exact same language and just utilize a tiny home. So more likely than not, if someone's building a guest house on their property, it's already going to be a small home. I mean, if utilizing the definition of a mother-in-law suite, that's,
So you just try it, what you did was combine all small into one.
Mhm.
Instead of having, to Alan's point, instead of having this over here. And this
Yes.
over here,
because what's.
you just for convenience, because we're talking small period.
Yes, because,
Just combined it all together, because those houses would still have to meet the construction
yes,
of a tiny house development, whether it's a mother-in-law's house or whether it's in a cluster.
and what's going to happen, and the reason why, it's lumped in here with this, what's going to happen is, as soon as tiny home clusters are allowed, someone's bound to pop up and say, can I put a tiny home in my backyard? And doing it this way, the tiny home issue, whatever you want to call it, is going to be in one place within the LDO. So whomever is doing zoning at that time could go to one place and realize and see that if you qualify as a guest house in your backyard, you qualify for a tiny home in your backyard.
Right.
That's the thought process behind putting it together with this.
And then they'd be able to look at all the requirements for
Yeah.
square footage and everything else.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And would that, at that point in time, the neighbors in that area be notified that,
Anytime you are required a conditional use, there's a public hearing, and yes, you have to notify the
I could,
neighbors.
I could just see that as a problem.
Are you saying you have to have a CUP for the mother-in-law? Is that your question?
Possibly, yeah, just.
So, yeah, so anytime we have a guest house, it would, so the guest house in here is permitted. Let's see.
I don't know, it almost seems to me like, oh, the tiny homes ought to be kind of a separate thing.
So a guest house is required to have a conditional use permit in each of its zoning districts. Yes. So across the board, anywhere, anyhow, it requires a conditional use permit.
And I guess the other thing is that's 4 acres. Is a. We're dead set on this fit up to a maximum of 15.
And no,
That seems huge.
yes, yeah, those numbers, that's what
I
I'm saying.
think that number ought to
that's-
be shrunk.
Yeah, that's why they're highlighted, so if you guys wanna look at those, you can most certainly look at those.
That's what Jessica was addressing earlier, was shrinking those numbers back down.
So this
So we didn't have the density.
is from 4 to 1.5.
It's,
But is that is that just a verbal recognition? It's not in this packet, right?
whatever you
Whatever we decide.
vote on and you you iterate to me, I will make the change and then you will vote on it and
Right.
I will make the changes, and then when I take it to council, those changes will be reflected in this.
Who brought up the 1.5 acre?
I had someone reach out to me who is a developer and explained like, just if you look at it from this perspective, you're going to have, if you do 4 acres and you take, your lot size and you divide out, then you could technically fit however many the math works, you could fit on there. If you are okay as the planning commission with the potential of 80 tiny homes, then that is one thing. If you want to help bring that density down, then that number should be looked at.
Okay.
You know, off the top of your head, how many square foot are on a square block?
No, I don't,
I don't know, so.
Yeah, I don't know any vacant blocks though, that are like a whole entire block.
Alan, do you?
A standard lot in town,
55 by 100 and
125, so 55 by 125 is the
So-
established part of town.
Roughly 60,000.
So,
Would be.
but like I said, that's just the established part of town, that's like around the downtown
Right.
area, it gets obviously bigger when you get to the
Right.
development.
Yeah. Go out. Further out.
And there are typically 10 lots in a 10
typically 55 times 5 is the length of the block, or 250 feet times
Okay.
the 125 twice plus a 20-foot alley.
Well, is this something that there's lots of things that almost seems like we need to redefine. That we need to.
This will probably be our fourth discussion we've had on this, so if whatever you guys think you need to do, that's fine.
There's a couple of things, I think Alan mentioned, like who regulates. Part of it says must be retained under common ownership. So that whoever owns that would be the one to regulate it, right? Like if I own an apartment complex, I would be the one to
Yeah.
regulate that.
Yeah, we discussed that. That way somebody can't come in and build a cluster and then just sell off
Right, yeah,
each individual tiny home. That way one landlord or management company has to maintain it and oversee it.
right, so you brought up like, moving in more people than the allotted square footage,
Right.
that common owner would be the one to regulate that.
Mhm.
And then, under defining tiny home item C, the last part, manufactured housing. Do we need to define that?
Manufactured housing,
Like I have a shed on that's because where I live has to be connected to my house and it matches my house. But I'm sure it was pre-manufactured, they didn't. You can buy things, pre-manufactured sheds and utility rooms and that
And a
look
lot
like
and a lot of
houses.
companies build them as a tiny home.
So,
so, when you build these, they're still gonna have to be permitted and inspected by the building inspector. So a shed is not gonna meet current building regs.
Right.
For a residence,
Yeah.
they're not gonna, it has to meet, the residential building codes.
I mean, wouldn't it be easy though to have a pre-manufactured tiny home?
They do sell them, and manufactured home is in the LDO, it is defined. Yeah. So, so tiny home does not include a manufactured home, is that?
So yes, it does not include a trailer, semi-trailer, camp trailer, recreational vehicle, or manufactured housing.
Mhm.
I mean,
So you
I
wanna,
think I've seen tiny home, like they're prefab
so you,
houses.
I'm looking at it from the opposite,
Yeah.
end. You're wanting to approve a pre-manufactured tiny home that is specifically built and sold on a tiny home spec.
Pre-approved or make some kind of, give some kind of definition of what we mean by manufactured
Sure.
housing
Sure.
would be my thought on that.
I can read the definition of manufactured home from the LDO. So the definition of manufactured home, it says, this is a structure that is transportable in one or more sections, built on a permanent chassis, designed to be towed to the site on removable wheels. It shall be mounted on a permanent foundation. The term includes, but is not limited to, the definition of mobile home as set forth in regulations governing the Mobile Home Safety and Construction Standards Program. Double-wide factory-built homes meeting the building code and manufactured homes mounted on permanent foundations shall be considered single-family homes.
So what you're talking about would not, it couldn't even fall under manufactured tiny home.
Yeah.
Because it's not, it's built to be portable, but it's not built to be towed.
Right, yeah, I'm thinking more like the prefab.
Yeah.
Right.
And I mentioned the shed because I can't think of the company that makes those sheds. They make like one-room cabins now.
Lots of companies are building that.
Yeah, so that was my thinking process when I read
Okay.
that. But
Yeah,
yeah,
so-
so that move set makes sense for me.
That's, yeah, you all would like to make some sort of verbiage to allow for or not allow for what would strictly be related to a pre-manufactured tiny home that would be, that would meet all building code standards.
Right,
Then you can-
it'd have to be stamped, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, because I'm thinking if I buy pre-made trusses, pre-made walls. And have it assembled. Is that manufactured?
Well, per the code, it would have to be engineered,
Yeah,
stamped.
okay, I think it's fine. I mean, just a question I had,
Okay, so
but
do you
just the
want
word
to,
manufactured is what
do
I.
we need to add verbiage for?
I would say to add verbiage that relates to, as long as the company that's building the manufactured tiny home is building it to the 2018 standard.
you're gonna hate me for this.
No, you're good.
You're absolutely gonna hate.
No.
But I'm wondering if we could continue this till next month, because one of the questions I have, I don't think can be answered this evening.
Okay.
And that is how many tiny homes we can get per acre. Well,
You can do that.
hey, there you go. He can answer.
12 per acre. City blocks about 2.5 acres.
Okay, well, per acre.
It's 3,500 square feet, I believe, what Jessica says, so you get 42,550 divided by 3,500 is 12 point something something. It's 12 tiny homes per acre. And 2.5 acres is what most city blocks do.
Okay.
Is that a lot for the 10 feet in between each tiny home?
Well, it's the thing she says that it's 3,500 square feet per building, and then you have all this stuff inside of that.
So the whole lot size.
So it a lot for the
Mhm.
10
Well,
feet between my
the
tiny
lot
home and
size is- yeah.
Steve's tiny home.
Yeah.
All right.
So I got that answered. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
I think you had a good idea. I know we've met several times.
Yeah.
But I still see some confusion. I would rather postpone it and make sure we do it right,
Sure.
would be my thought.
Okay.
And I would suggest that you drop that 4 acres
Okay.
down to 2 acres. That would make 24 homes in a cluster, not 48. 48 to me seems like a lot of houses. And a lot of tiny houses all grouped together. This will keep, 24 will keep it much more manageable.
Do you have
An upper limit?
Yep.
4 acres.
Okay.
2 and 4, that's just my opinion now, that's,
anybody else?
If you did 2 or 5, ideally that would be like 2 city blocks. Would that be?
yeah.
Five? Everybody okay with 5?
Whatever. I just threw my suggestion out, I'm not, that's not cutting stone.
I was thinking the same thing. Is, I mean, I was considering 3 to 8-ish.
I think that's good on that.
3 to 8,
No,
2 to 5.
2 to
the
5.
2 to 5,
2 to 5?
like you said, 2 blocks, that'd be a plenty. Or if you got out of control.
2 to 5.
Because ideally, we've been discussing this for possibly the outskirts of town.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Possibly the VFW, if they wanted to build something for veterans only, they would have the capacity down there to do something like this.
Yeah.
For veterans.
Theoretically, yes, these spaces are gonna come on the outskirts of town.
Right.
Do we have anyone asking to do this?
No.
Okay, so we're just
just-
defining, we're just making some
We're getting ahead of,
being progressive.
yeah.
We adopted the city code, which has the regulations in it, and we have nothing to help zoning wise to allow it. So it's more just trying to be cohesive between the zoning and the building.
Makes sense.
So do you need a motion to continue?
Do we want to continue?
Do we have any other
I would-
unanswered questions?
You want to continue?
I would like to continue and make sure we get it right.
Like to make a motion to
I would make a motion to that effect. Postpone it till next month.
We'll have a second.
You ready, Jessica?
Motion to continue. Okay, yes,
I'll second.
this is for a motion to continue, correct? Grant.
Aye.
McLean,
Aye.
Talman,
Aye.
Parks,
Aye.
Mauer. Dees.
Aye.
We'll continue at next month's meeting.
Okay.
Does that include another public hearing?
No. No. It just,
Point of clarification.
yeah, no, just discussion. Vote. All right. Takes care of the public hearings for the evening. Next thing up is to bring us up to date, Jessica, on a conditional use permit for Payola Auto Care.
Yes, Payola Auto Care currently operates, legally in the NCR one zoning district under ordinance 2985, which renewed, conditional use permit 04 CUP 03. This business is located at 102 South Hospital Drive. And over kind of last several years, the city's received various complaints. Most recently, line of sight issue at the intersection of Hospital Drive and WIA. The ordinance that outlines the conditions of the CUP are attached. After we received the complaint, staff followed up and noted conflict with conditions 3, which I can read those. Condition 3 that states any additional parking shall be screened from all residential and institutional uses with a 6-foot fence. Condition 4, no overnight parking except for 2 after-hours drop-off spaces and 2 spaces for display of for-use automobiles shall be allowed in the parking spaces along Hospital Drive. Condition 7, parking shall not be allowed in the area 15-foot south of WIA Street and 15-foot east of Hospital Drive. In condition 8, all work shall be completed within an enclosed structure. No exterior storage is allowed. The owner was notified of the non-compliance and met with city staff, and a short-term plan was implemented to clear up the line of sight issues. Attached also is the owner's preferred words list that he would like to see in a CUP. At this time, I'm not requesting that you act on the CUP. Instead, I'm seeking clarification and input on setting a public hearing to potentially amend the CUP at a later date. So if you would like to look over the conditional use permit, match it up with what the owner is asking, and then give direction on if you think those can be accommodated in any way, and then we can set a public hearing later this summer.
Been here before.
Yes. I realize that I have marked, that I would give you an image, an overview image. I just realized that that was neglected to be put into your packet. But parking has become the main issue.
Agree.
I had the one thought, right? Of the parts delivery trucks.
Mhm.
They don't have any place to park off the street.
Mhm.
I've seen them many times. They're parked on the street right around the corner. They're 4-ways on and they gotta jump out in traffic to carry in parts. Somehow or another, there needs to be 2 spaces required for them to be able to pull off the street and get out of traffic.
Sure.
And I'm a little, guess I don't understand, on number 8, all works to be, worked on an enclosed structure. No exterior storage is allowed. Is that,
So, just to recap, conditional use permits stay with the property. They don't, when the business ceases traditionally, unless the planning commission meets to revoke the CUP, they stay with the property. So he is operating under a conditional use permit that was approved for a prior business that was in there. All work shall be completed within the enclosed structure. Any sort of work on any vehicle, whether it's a tire change or an oil change, anything, should be inside of a bay. The no exterior storage is allowed,
Tires.
any sort of equipment, inoperable vehicles, anything that is going to clutter up the space and take away from having a delivery truck be able to park out front.
in other words, the way times are, and that if he starts working on a vehicle and he can't get the parts. In other words, he would push it out and push it into that lot.
The
He
best
could.
case scenario would be that whatever's stored in the lot that he's never going to fix be removed from the property, and that when there is a supply chain issue, then yes, he can park that vehicle behind that fence. And then when the parts come, he can bring the vehicle back out and then fix it and then pass it back off to the owner. So, his desired number 8 is to remove all work shall be completed within an enclosed structure. He would like to modify to all non-vehicle items be stored outside, must be screened from public view. That's his desire, so. And do keep in mind, when we set a public hearing, he would be here to explain and clarify what these are and.
That put it up on satellite, so we're talking about all of this area here.
That is what we were attempting to,
Oh, yeah. All of this area to
Oh,
the
yeah.
south, and then the 15 feet south of Wea. Is what it says too, as well, where you can see them parked up here. I'm
Yes,
assuming
yes.
that's what they're
So,
talking about,
yeah,
Here
yeah.
and here,
Well, how do you,
that's a lot of cars.
yes,
how do you define that road that used to go into the academy?
that has been specifically with him, we have approached that subject. He is asked to be allowed to park outside the fence on that alley, for lack of a better word. Which is we expressed would not be permitted. That is technically city right away, so has to be inside the fence.
You have a water line through there.
So that's technically a city alley then? Okay. I didn't know if that was part of Ursuline or.
It was a long mess to find out, I
Okay.
should say, through history and everything, yes.
And who owns that property, man? I mean, where he's parking all those cars, does he own that property?
Well, behind the fence.
Behind the fence he owns, and then some of it, to the west of it is Arista,
Here he
but the
is.
right of way is all city right of way.
Yeah.
The fence goes up to his property line.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, then a lot of stuff that's in that area that's months away from being worked on, then he's probably gonna have to take it to another spot. Because of the lack of space. Which is real understandable now with the supply chain problem.
I think a public hearing is good because we need to hear from him, how many of these 40 or so cars. Is there a plan, or are they just a project that got started and never finished and now they're just sitting there?
Sure.
So let she reiterate what she said, complaints were had, staff met with him. And we understand that he's operating under an old CUP. So what brought up the possibility of a public hearing would be to allow him to approach you, to see if he could modify the original CUP under constraints that he can work his business in, but still be safe to the public. That is our number one concern, is the safety of the intersection.
Yeah, because item, condition 11 is kind of the caveat to most CUPs that we have to notify in any change to it. We still have to notify in the manner that the original CUP was processed under.
We're not doing anything with it right now.
No, I just was asking for guidance on if you are open to looking at this to potentially amend it at a later date.
I would be, I mean, I would be potential look, I mean, I would be interested in looking at it probably. I don't know if I would agree with everything he's put here, but,
Sure. And that
things have changed since
Yeah.
we did it originally in 03 or 06 or whatever it was,
yeah,
a little bit.
And I know, I don't know him personally, but it takes on a lot more diverse mechanic work than the previous one did.
So. Okay.
Okay.
I'll look at what we started with. All right,
So, do we make a motion for a public hearing?
we'll,
no,
We can talk about it.
you guys are open to it, and so I will get back with the owner and
See what he wants to do.
Yeah.
Okay.
see what he wants to do. All right, how about the Community Economic Development Director report?
so the building inspection department is. They're taking off right now. We're over 100, so we're at about 110 permits for the year. Casey's passed their final inspection with fire and building. So whenever they see fit, they are, as far as the city goes, legally ready to operate business. Roush Coleman is continuing to build homes. They just submitted 3 new home permits for Hidden Meadows. The May Planning Commission meeting, it says public hearing to amend a CUP. It is not this one. It It is Brewers, they sold, so they have a buyer that is moving in, and we need to look at that CUP and take from what Brewers had and make it fit the new business, because there's less things that they will be doing. And then at the April City Council meeting, the American Legion agreement was voted on to get that all squared away. Wallace Park Athletic Facility guidelines were approved, ADA parking spaces for the ball fields were approved, and there will be, since the concession stand isn't in a state and there's really no one to run it. This summer, Wes Joy with the rec commission is looking at food trucks down there, so that'll be something new. And then what seemed to be a big topic lately, the traffic lights at Baptiste and Hedge is officially up and running, so they, Works got the new cabinet installed and everything's going in.
That changes the timing of the lights.
Yes, it is no longer, if you're not paying attention, you miss the light.
You can now go yield on green instead of just a red light when you turn left.
Yeah. It doesn't turn yellow the second half.
I noticed that
Yeah.
yesterday.
We're just thankful it was installed prior to the close of the school year. That was a big question amongst a lot of parents.
So I have a CUP question.
Uh-huh.
So the CUP stays with the address, not with the landowner or the tenant or anything like that.
Check with the address, if there is 6 months of vacancy, discontinuance, then you can discontinue the CUP. There is always ways that the planning commission finds their non-compliance to set a public hearing and revoke it, amend it.
So we just amend it instead of possibly, or is there any possibility of just killing one and then creating a new one for the new owner?
Considering he already has it under his name, amending it would.
Well, I was referring to the past lines. If it comes to something like that, because I've heard who bought it, and I mean, he still does technically mechanic work, but it's totally different mechanic work. So, and in any other location in general, not just auto mechanics, that, you know, somebody, if one building's been one type of business for years,
Mhm.
and then it changes to a completely different type of business,
So-
what's the chance, or what is the possibility, or is it even feasible to just kill that one CUP and then create a new one for the new owner?
So the LDO looks at it as a use, and regardless if they're a diesel mechanic or a gas mechanic, the use is still heavy services and retail, and that's what the CUP is for. And then you mark conditions for those conditional use permits under it. So we're amending the conditions to the CUP, which they're, when I reviewed theirs, they are still going to be overlapping business hours, parking, off-street parking. There'll still be some of those basics that are the same.
The reference I was
But I do,
thinking
that is a good question.
is where the Liberty Tax, and then right beside it is the smoothie shop.
Uh-huh.
You know, for decades, that was a used car lot,
Yes.
and the Liberty Tax was the office, and then the smoothie shop was his little two-bay building to detail cars and work on cars. So those two businesses went in, and so if the used car lot was operating under a CUP, the other two businesses come in are completely 180.
So the change of use, so that would
Okay.
create a discontinuance.
Okay. All right,
We've done it at the carpet store. We went through one segment and did like 8 discontinuances because stuff like that happens.
Okay.
And they don't even realize it's a CUP there,
Right.
and they're not even operating
Yeah.
anymore. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
all right.
And then it does bring up a valid point that, we always say when things slow down, we do need to put together a list of, 6 to 8 that are no longer being utilized and we need to discontinue them. So that is always, that's something that we can
Okay.
start looking at.
All right, anybody have anything else for staff?
Scooter still coming?
Yes, yeah.
Anything else that you know
Not that I know
of out there? I've just heard rumors.
of. The rumors are good though.
Nothing we can speak on. But
Right.
Did somebody read the other day, somebody thought we should get a Buc-ee's?
That would be nice, right?
Yeah.
I don't think we have enough trash for that.
I hope so.
You get in here, we'll find you.
You put in 100 gas pumps.
All right, I'll take the motion to adjourn then if we're all through.
Make a motion to adjourn.
A second.
All.
Grant.
Aye.
McLean.
Hey.
Captain. Barth.
Aye.
Miller. Aye. Hughes.
No one ever said